Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
And so the Graf and Nijmegen bridges were captured as ordered. Also, the high ground was captured and held. A very marginal performance, and one that will not be duplicated in this war. The perfect airborne show. Tucker crossed the wall at 1500 on D+3, and by nightfall the bridge was ours. Van der Voort with the 2nd Battalion 505th took this end. In this final effort we were aided by the Guards Armoured Division. The Irish Guards assisted Tucker in clearing out the boating point. 1 battalion of Grenadier Guards were made available to the division as a reserve. The situation was very critical. Repeated attacks up until about 4 days ago have been made against the division position, all without success. The latest have been very costly to the German. My relations with the British have been most satisfactory. Although I dislike their professional methods, or lack of method, I nevertheless find them superb to work with. We have gotten along well together. And that, of course, was Brigadier General Jim Gavin.
Who else?
His diary entry after the event, the 8th of October 1944. So he writes one on the 16th of September and then doesn't write another one until that entry on the 8th of October. He's busy because he's had a major operation to take part in, Operation Market Garden, and now he's got a hot foot to Paris and have his way with Marlene Dietrich.
All with 2 cracked vertebrae.
All with 2 cracked vertebrae. I mean, it's no end to the brilliance of this man.
Welcome, Achtung, Achtung. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me. I'm Murray and James Holland, and this was meant to be episode 3. It is now episode 5 of our Market Garden series, and we're focusing on the garden rather than the market, although market is the airborne, garden is the land operation. We're sort of, I suppose, yes, 82nd Airborne are part of market, aren't they?
Look, whatever, it's Market Garden, okay?
Exactly, but the fact that this is confusing is entirely reflective of, and confused, I think confused rather than confusing, is entirely reflective of what the hell was going on. There was a very good thing in the Times the other day about the making of Bridge Too Far. It was a diary piece, but many of the key players turned up as advisors. So Roy Urquhart was an advisor on it, and John Frost was an advisor on it, and famously told Anthony Hopkins not to run between buildings, that you have to walk and all that sort of stuff. And interestingly, he took his smock off and took his helmet off and wore his red beret in his battle dress when he was doing his rounds, so that people would know it was him. I mean, it's extraordinary, right? Anyway, Brian Horrocks in that piece, he said, I didn't feel the need to be an advisor on that film because it was my battle. I was there and I had absolutely no idea what was going on.
You sort of get that impression from him, don't you? I mean, the thing about Horrocks is I don't think he was terribly good, but I think he's a tremendous fellow. But
that someone's prepared to admit that, I think, is really rather refreshing, isn't it?
Well, he's impossible not to like.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so we're going to have to rewind a tiny bit to Monday, the 18th of September, so D+1.
And there's lots going on because there's stuff going on 30 Corps' route northwards. There's stuff going on in and around Eindhoven, Son, etc. There's also a hell of a lot going on at Nijmegen as well. I think it's really, really funny that the Americans call the 30 Corps route Hell's Highway, and the British call it the cab route. There's a kind of sort of difference of approach there.
Yeah, ever so slightly. I mean, I do think that last bit of the Gavin quote is, although I dislike their professional methods or lack of method, I nevertheless find them superb to work with. What on earth does that mean?
Well, it's a slightly paradoxical statement.
Ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly. But I thought we'd go with it. What we're going to do is in the first half of this, we're going to look at the 18th and the 19th. And the 18th, there's still plenty going on in the Eindhoven area. And it sort of becomes less so as the emphasis shifts to Nijmegen. And then we're going to look in the second half at the final capture of the Nijmegen bridges, which is just an amazing episode. So building up to an episode crescendo, I'd like to think. So should we just go through Monday, the 18th of September? And we'll switch from one to the other a little bit, I'm afraid.
So at first light, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment extends west to join with the 504th at bridge number 9.
These are parachute infantry regiments belonging to the 82nd All-American. So this is 504th, 505th, 508th. We're in the Nijmegen area here.
Exactly. And then at 6:30, Company E of the 2nd 508th catches road bridge number 10 at Neerbosch. So they have a sort of an embarrassment of bridges at this point, apart from the one that you need to get to Arnhem finally.
But just hold this thought about the Neerbosch. Just park Neerbosch in your mind at the moment because it comes up later.
And that's good for keeping the enemy out or denying the enemy the use of that bridge, but also you're spreading yourself thin. It's Bilbo Baggins with the butter spread thinly on the toast, as it were. At 07:45, Captain Frank Novak leads Company G, the 3 508th, towards the bridge.
So this is the main bridge across Nijmegen. This is the road bridge. This is the one that two companies, A and B, were trying to capture late on the evening of the 17th. So this is the following morning. And at the end, do you remember, for those who were listening to episode 2...
It's the fateful machine gun crew who basically extend World War II beyond Christmas by firing on the 82nd at that point. They're schmucks.
If it hadn't been for that one goddamn Spandau.
When you put it like that, it's hard to argue with. Then at 0800 hours, the 406th Division, which is the enemy.
Yes. So just to go very quickly back to Company G3 of the 3rd Battalion, 508th. So Gavin pulls them back, says, okay, right, we're not going to do it tonight because of the fateful machine gun post late in the evening on the 17th. Let's reconvene in the morning. And we'll crack on then. So Company G is the kind of next attack. But my point is, that's still only one company. So, that's like 90 men, 100 men, whatever.
And in the meantime, Easy Company of the 2nd 508th have gone to the Neerbosch Bridge. Why? Why, when you've got that connecting tissue already and what you're missing is the main bridge? Already there's divided effort. And I think one of the things people may have picked up from the Arnhem section, the last 2 episodes, is that dividing your effort, reducing your concentration of force,
it's not a good thing, especially when you've only got a handful of mortars, machine guns, Tommy guns and Garans.
And you're lightly armed and you don't have proper artillery and you don't have, the firepower that a conventional infantry attack would have.
So meanwhile, we've got the rather rubbish 448 406th Ersatz Division, from Wehrkreis 6.
Yeah.
And there's been pockets of Germans up on the Groesbeek Heights all night, and they've been doing kind of what in Burma you would call jitter raids.
Yeah.
So these are little pockets of people kind of wandering through the forest firing machine guns and MP40s and stuff, and actually doing the reverse of what the American paratroopers were doing. This idea that no one knows where anyone is, and ever so often, Americans suddenly appear in the woods and fire Tommy guns.
Yeah.
Or ever so often, Germans appear and fire MP40s, Schmeissers as they're known. And it creates confusion and a sense of no one knows what the strength is. And this also reinforces Gavin's determination to hold on to the Groesbeek Heights, come what may, as a priority, and as a priority overtaking the road bridge in Nijmegen.
Yeah.
And then at 8 o'clock, at 0800, the main division attacks through Zifflik and Weiler. And Weiler are these 2 little villages right on the Dutch-German border. For those of you who listened to episode 2, you'll remember that extending east from Nijmegen along the southern banks of the River Vaal is this narrow little corridor of very, very low-lying land before it rises up into the Groesbeek Heights. And Zifflik and Weiler are exactly there. And they capture an ammo dump on DZT, which, if anything, is going to make Gavin feel a little bit paranoid about hanging on to that drop zone and protecting that drop zone in an incredible mirroring or echoing of what has been going on at Arnhem. It's that. And of course, because they're crap, very quickly the 406th Division attack stalls because not only are they not well trained, they have almost as few heavy weapons as the American 82nd Airborne. In fact, they've probably got even less.
But it's enough. To cause delay and distract from the actual prize, isn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly that. So by 10:30, that attack is stalling. By 12:40 p.m., the airborne, mainly the 505th, is tacking east from DZT. And what that means is, again, not only are they holding on to the drop zone, but they're going beyond what they need to do. They're going a little bit extra, going that extra mile, literally and metaphorically, which again means that they haven't got as many troops as they might otherwise have in Nijmegen city itself. By 2 o'clock, the 82nd Airborne has regained entirely Drop Zone T and Landing Zone T, literally as the second lift arrives. They've killed about 50 Germans, they've wounded about 400, and they've taken 150 prisoner of war.
This directly mirrors the KOSB having to fight for the drop zone at the Ginkelheide at exactly the same time on the Monday afternoon. All Monday morning into Monday afternoon. And this lift's delayed as well. So actually, we said about the arrival of 4th Parachute Brigade in Arnhem, good thing, bad thing, because if they'd arrived while that 406th Division attack was sort of in full flower, you may have had a proper calamity on the landing zone and on the drop zone. Whereas you're spared that, but what you've done is you've lost a morning.
Meanwhile, Captain Frank Novak with Company G is on his own, with 90 men trying to capture the road bridge in Nijmegen. I mean, what the heck? So it's a bad show, really. I mean, from Gavin's point of view, it's, thank God, I've secured the drop zones, the landing zones. I've got them secured. I've kicked back the German counterattack out of the Reichswald, wiped the brow, phew, everything's under control. But as you say, it's eating huge amounts of time. And of course, because this is Germans and because of everything that the Germans represent by this stage of the war, really, really bad old men and teenagers and people from kind of sort of Arbeitsdienst, the teenage kind of workers group with their kind of cruddy rifles and antiquated stuff and half-fitting ammo and all the rest of it, are told to attack out of the Reichswald yet again. So they do, but yet again are kind of seen off.
But you can't ignore it, is the thing. I mean, this is the key to what happens throughout this battle, isn't it? You've got your absolute best people on the Allied side, as it were, and there are arguments about the extent to which, what is an elite soldier and all that. But all you've got to do is hold them up. All you've got to do is make them put their heads down. All you've got to do is force them into having to counterattack you, and they're not doing the thing they're sent to do.
Nope. Exactly that. At 2:31 p.m., the second lift starts to land. 385 gliders. I mean, imagine what that looks like in the sky. I mean, do you remember all those old I remember all those sort of oral testimonies of people kind of, in Dover in August 1940, I looked up and the sky was black with crosses and all that kind of stuff. And the Luftwaffe came over, and it's 100 Dorniers. 385 gliders plus towers and tugs. So there's more than 700 aircraft.
My mother-in-law's father worked at Latimer Park as a translator. In his photo album are photographs of the wackos going over Latimer House.
Amazing. And I bet it looks pretty impressive, doesn't it?
It's just like, what the Jesus Christ. You would go grab your camera from your digs, from your billet. You would run out onto the parkland and you would take a photograph.
And you'd think, damn, why haven't I got an iPhone 15 that can hone in on this? That's what you'd think. But anyway, all 385 land and one pilot's killed, 1,779 troops, 201 jeeps.
It's incredible.
I mean, holy moly. 55 guns, 210 tons of supplies. Yeah. This is exactly what they need for a concerted effort.
Yes.
Towards Nijmegen Bridge. I mean, just imagine if they'd done a kind of sort of David Sterling kind of 2 lines of special forces and SAS types in their jeeps. Hurtling into Nijmegen.
Well, who knows? Because, you can sort that with a roadblock. That's the problem.
Well, I suppose so. But anyway. But while all this is going on, Captain Frank Novak is pushing forward.
And he's still not at the bridge.
With elements of the 3rd Battalion of the 508th, but only one company and a few others behind. And lo and behold, they're still not at the bridge. And this is the moment that lead elements of 30 Corps finally reach Nijmegen.
Yeah, exactly.
Shoulder to the wheel.
Let's go. Let's get to it, lads. Surely.
What just seems to be lacking in all of this is a kind of sense of, right, my God, clock's ticking. We've just got to go. Right, come on. You're here now. Let's just German straight in. Boom, boom, boom. Let's just go and hit that bridge. It's all, well, there's a bit. Time and again, the 82nd Airborne in World War II show themselves to be a supreme outfit of highly trained, highly motivated men. They do amazing things. They do amazing things in Sicily, in Italy, Anzio, D-Day.
Yeah.
And they do really good stuff here. There's no question about it. The capturing of the Grave Bridge, absolutely perfect. The securing of the Grosvenor Heights, can't argue that. Really, really well done. Newman Bridge, yep, another tick. It's all really good. And yet, when it comes to capturing the Nijmegen Road Bridge, there is just this kind of weird mental block.
Yeah.
So it's worth just quickly going through this controversy, because how on earth did this happen? So Colonel Walter Winton, who is the G2 of the 82nd Airborne, notes that on the 17th of September, which is obviously the D-Day for Market Garden or Operation Market, that a train of Germans have left Nijmegen on the afternoon and a second early on the 18th. In other words, the troops in Nijmegen are bugging out. If that doesn't signal that this is a town that is ripe for the plucking, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
On that first day, the 508th, they've secured Beek, which is just below the heights on that northern edge of Groesbeek heights that we've talked about, and the heights overlooking the Waal.
Yeah.
The 505th have secured Mook and Reithorst, which is on the other side as the heights drop down again. There's those sporadic attacks that we've talked about overnight. But casualties are really, really light. The 504th PIR has 19 casualties on the 17th of September. Right. And the 505th has 63 casualties only on D+1. Yeah. They are mainly doing the work of kind of reclaiming drop zone T and landing zone T. Yeah. By middle of the afternoon on the 18th, they've captured 885.
Well, which tells you how keen the Germans are to fight, really, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does, but it also shows you how superior as troops the 82nd are.
Yeah,
So come on, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So finally, on the mid-afternoon, they cleared all this out, and Gavin then outlines a plan to seize the road bridge that night, the 18th, 19th of September. It's like, phew, okay, great. Browning he's then around. He's got his command post set up with his 38 gliders and all the rest of it. And he approves the attack for that night and then retracts. And Gavin says, on giving a more thorough view of the situation of 30 Corps, he felt that the retention of the high ground south of Nijmegen was of greater importance and directed that the primary mission should be to hold out the high ground and to retain its position southwest of the Maas-Waal Canal.
Why?
And so, he's a superior officer, and this is what Gavin is saying. But what you don't get is any sense of Gavin going, no, that's completely wrong. Trust me, I've seen the situation. We can say that. Please let me do this. There's no kind of...
That is the thing that's missing, because you can argue with your boss like this, it is the point. It isn't a buffet culture. You can say, no, I'm really sorry.
And he knows enough of the British to know this by now.
Yeah. It's a very weird moment, isn't it? But then is he thinking, well, I've had attacks on my drop zones all day and landing zones all day. We don't know what's lurking. There is a rumor, isn't there, that there are 1,000 tanks in the Reichswald at one point. Well, if there are 1,000 tanks in the Reichswald, we just ought to call this entire thing off.
Yes, but no one has spotted a single tank. So, they all know what the Germans do. So if there's German armour, they're going to attack immediately.
Yeah.
If they haven't attacked, that means it isn't there. And it might be coming, of course, but... Leave a skeleton force. If you need to redirect it. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a very small area here. I mean, from the Groesbeek Heights into the Nijmegen Bridge, 4 miles, 5 miles, something like that? I mean, it's nothing. So it's a really bad decision, because what they could have easily done is left the 505th and now the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, who are both there. They've been reinforced, yeah. They've got 1,779 troops and 50 dead jeeps and whatever, And then you can direct all of the 508th, plus most of the anti-tank guns, to Nijmegen, and a load of the jeeps and a load of other stuff.
Yeah.
Directly onto Nijmegen and securing the bridge. And that would have given you a really big number of troops, which probably would have overwhelmed them on that night.
A very poor call.
However, they don't. It just doesn't happen. It's called off. It's called off that night. It is unbelievable. It is... for all the kind of criticism of Shan Hackett and weird decisions of Urquhart and all the rest of it, I think the blunders at Arnhem are hiding what is a really catastrophically bad decision. Because, who knows what would have happened if they got across the bridge on the 18th or even the 17th? What happens if they managed to hold that? Most of 10th SS and half of 9th FS had concentrated on kind of sending back there. But that meant you would have had 2 divisions against badly mauled 2 SS divisions. And the odds would have swung massively in your favour. And what it means is that the moment 30 Corps turn up, they can just swing straight over.
Yeah, and this is the thing that's evident at Arnhem Bridge, is these airborne guys, once they're dug into somewhere, they are extremely difficult to shift, really, really hard to remove, aren't they? And that would have been the case if the 82nd Airborne had taken up positions around Nijmegen Bridge in a similar way. It puts them at different risk to different German strength. But yeah, you're absolutely right. 30 Corps turn up. One simple difference is you could have a foo at the Nijmegen Bridge immediately. And there's that piece of high ground where what's that pub called? The Blue Nun or something? That we've got.
The Blue Hand.
If you've got a foo up on that high ground there, you can see all the ground stretching onto Arnhem.
Well, in Belvedere, that castle thing overlooking Nijmegen Bridge.
Exactly. So if you hold that,
then
you...
castle thing. It's a castle.
It is an actual castle. It's not just a castle thing. But you unlock the whole thing. You unlock your gunnery to the space north of the river. And worrying about the Groesbeek Heights is one piece of high ground to worry about. What about the piece of high ground that directly overlooks the actual blinking bridge itself?
Exactly that. Let's just play a kind of a what if. So let's just say, okay, they didn't get it on the first night, but say they launched that attack on the 18th, 19th. There's still not many troops, German troops, in Nijmegen at that time. They overwhelm it. They take the bridge, they secure the bridge. 8:20 a.m. on Tuesday, the 19th of September. Yeah. That is when the Grenadier Guards, armoured part of the Grenadier Guards, meet Colonel Reuben Tucker's 504th PIR at Grave. Now, they're 33 hours behind schedule, but by that point, they're only kind of 4 miles away from the bridge. So best foot forward, go straight across. 19th of September is Black Tuesday.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if you just keep going hell for leather and you go, okay, right, we're going to hold the bridge and we're just going to push it? Because if you've cleared out Nijmegen and you've got both ends of the bridge, you can afford to go forward because the Germans then can't go south without confronting you.
Well, yes, and you catch out the Germans south of Arnhem Bridge who are facing in the other direction trying to deal with what's going on in the town.
You sandwich them. So what do? So they then turn their attention to you. You've got superior firepower because it's coming through from 30 Corps. You can turn the whole table. You absolutely can turn the table because you're destroying most of 10th Panzer, SS Panzer. And then you can push into the town. Then you've got the mother of vein because you can resupply the Frostmen at the other end. Yeah. So actually, the whole idea that it's completely a lost cause. I mean, there are some fundamental problems with the whole airborne plan, which we can talk about at the end of the series. But I really do think that if you're talking about operation busting decisions, the one not to attack the Nijmegen Bridge in full throttle on the 17th, and again, second time again, on the night of the 18th, 19th. Those are the two decisions for me which absolutely kick this operation into the long grass.
They're the 10% of the 90%.
Right. Anyway, let's get back to Tuesday the 19th because it ain't happened. It hasn't happened. They haven't launched an attack. So German's 59th Infantry Division finally reached the 101st Airborne Perimeter on the 19th of September.
Yeah.
So this is 6 infantry battalions. 2 are kind of okay-ish. The rest are rubbish. Understrength, undertrained, underarmed. 59th Division, however, this is the German infantry division.
Yeah.
Infanteria Divisione, reinforced by assorted Hermann Goering training replacement units from Division Walter. They were all consolidated in Kampfgruppe Ewald. They're ordered to attack on a broad front south of Somme, which you remember was a bridge that was blown up, to Oudenarde. So that stretch that the 101st Airborne have got.
Yeah.
They make absolutely no impression whatsoever. And this is why the 101st start calling it Hell's Highway, because of the intensity of the fighting. But they're dug in, they're holding it. As you say, it's incredibly difficult to attack. In this flat area, you've got to expose yourself. They get shot to pieces, and that's that.
Yeah.
Later on that afternoon, again in the Eindhoven area, do you remember the bridge at Best had been blown and they hadn't got it, but the 1st 502nd, which is part of the 101st, and the 15th and 19th Hussars, who've peeled off from 30 Corps, make another attempt to capture the kind of remains of the bridge and hold that crossing point anyway.
Yeah.
In the early of the afternoon on the 19th September, Jim Gavin meets General Horrocks, who's now arrived in Nijmegen, and tells him of the latest plan to attack Nijmegen Bridge. And he now intends to send the 2nd 505th, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Van der Voort, to take the southern end as quickly as possible and send another force across in boats to seize the north end. This is suddenly quite a big game changer from sort of sending in companies A and B from 508th PIR, probing in on the kind of first night. This is now a kind of coordinated international attack of British and Americans, some in boats, some not in boats, some in tanks. And, a river crossing in boats is obviously, once you've got to that sort of situation, you've kind of lost the initiative.
Yeah, ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly. They've got 33 canvas assault boats coming with 30 core, but they haven't arrived yet, and that's the problem, because with the 30 core engineer train, which is still sort of lagging behind. And Gavin is told that they'll be ready for early morning on the 20th of September. So everyone's like, okay, great, fine, we'll do that then. Well, let's reconvene yet again. We won't do it on the 17th. We won't do it on the 19th, the 18th, 19th. We won't do it on the 19th. We'll do it first thing on the morning of the 20th of September. What chance of that being delayed again? But anyway.
Well, then there's the big meanwhile is that the SS have now finally
They've
shown
now
up.
kicked into gear.
Yeah, and because they've been given plenty of time to do that. And Kampfgruppe Reinhold, Hauptsturmführer Leo Hermann Reinhold, who's the commanding officer of SS Panzer Regiment 10. And they'd sort of do a reverse negative version of what's happening in Arnhem. They set up in the buildings around the bridge, and there's the park, and around the Belvedere, the castle we were talking about, the castle-y thing.
Yeah, the castle thing that's actually a castle.
They set fire to some bridges. They do some, standard plundering. The Protestant hospital is evacuated. But basically what this means is it's no longer scantily defended, and it's no longer being held by ear and stomach troops or whatever you could, scrape together.
Well, the interesting thing is it is still quite scantily defended, but it's not scantily defended by 60-year-olds. It's now scantily defended by less scantily defenders than was before. So in other words, by any reckoning, this is still not a strong defence, but it's stronger than it was. We're now talking, 1,500 men rather than 700. And we're talking about SS troops rather than ear, nose and stomach troops and old men and teenagers. Yeah. And what they're doing, the reason why they're setting fire to all these buildings is this is like a force multiplier. This is a classic SS tactic, which they kind of learned in Russia. If you want to kind of seem really aggressive and scary and kind of make out that there's more of you than you do, you just evacuate lots of buildings and set them on fire. And what that causes is vast amounts of smoke and flames and confusion. And you put lots of wrecks in the roads and rubble in the roads and make life as difficult for anyone to attack as they possibly can. And, frankly, it's incredibly effective.
Yeah.
There's Kampfgruppe Reinhold, who is then reinforced by Kampfgruppe Uhling, which is Hauptsturmführer Karl-Heinz Uhling of the 2nd Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 21. Yeah. And what they've now got by the afternoon of the 19th is a pretty formidable defensive position around both Belvedere and Hunter Park, which is up at the road bridge, but also over the railway bridge, which is near Kreienhof Park. And this is really, really bad news for the attackers. But even so, on that afternoon, the attack is going to go in straight away, even though the boats haven't arrived, kind of, gaining more ground of the northern part of Nijmegen as it gets near to the river. The British are to provide a company of infantry and an armoured regiment. And on one attack with the 82nd, who are going to talk around Kreienhof Park, and then the other one is going to be a troop from the 3rd Squadron of the Grenadier Guards and one platoon from 2 Company of the 1st Grenadier Guards, plus Company D of the 2nd 505th. So suddenly you've got British and Americans working alongside one another for the first time with different tactics, different command structures and all the rest of it. Not necessarily a problem, but it's, again, you're making life just a little bit harder for yourself.
Additional friction.
Than you would have done had you got on with it on kind of the evening of the 17th or even the afternoon of the 18th, 19th. Anyway, at 3:00 that afternoon on the 19th, the attack on the southern end of the railway bridge begins. There's no opposition at all until they reach the marshalling yards, which is just to the south of the bridge, and they're still there. Company D dismounts of the 2nd 505th, and under tank fire, they try to work their way around the bridge. Yeah. And they get bogged down around Kreienhof Park, which is a tiny little kind of triangle of land. It's really not a big area at all, but you're surrounded by buildings. You can't get across this open area. That's where you need to get across to get to the mouth of the railway bridge. And they just can't. And the leading British tank is knocked out and just no further progress is made whatsoever. And at the same time, a further attack is made against the road bridge using a similar route used by Captain Novak's Company G of the day before, which also similarly gets no further than where they get to, which is some way south of the bridge. So paratroopers and British tanks near the Belvedere and Hunter Park, they're attacking, the 2 attacking forces split. And again, they just get, they take a few buildings, but this is proper house-to-house stuff. This is mouse holing, it's clearing one road at a time. Yeah. And this, as everyone knows by now from long years of fighting, is an incredibly time-consuming process. You only have to think of kind of Battle of Ortona in December 1943 on the eastern coast in Italy, for example, or Cassino, or any of these places. It's just
it's hard and it's dispiriting.
It's dispiriting. Belvedere might be kind of, within a stone's throw, effectively, but that could take you all day just to kind of get another kind of 70 yards. So there's an account by a local Dutch diarist who goes,
"The centre of the town looks like hell. A red glow hangs against the black sky. The crackling of fires can be heard from afar."
Really shouldn't be laughing at that.
No, we shouldn't.
This moment of city trauma.
Terrible.
But anyway.
And
meanwhile, the battle is still going on at Somme. So at 5 o'clock, this is round Eindhoven, where the bridge has been blown, the first bridge. It's now being bridged by the British engineers, of course, which is how the 30 Corps are able to get to Nijmegen. But Panzer Brigade 107 has reached the sector and makes an attack from Helmand, not to be confused with Afghanistan, against the Somme bridge. And they get absolutely nowhere. There's been some glider reinforcement there as well.
But it's that they're doing it at all, that there's pressure everywhere. And if you're 30 Corps or 2nd Army or all of these people all jumbled up together, you've got to figure out where the priority is, where is the danger?
You've still got to defend it. The taxi rank has to be protected from becoming Hell's Highway, is the truth of the matter. But 101st, with their support by the 30 Corps that have peeled off, are completely successful, it has to be said. They stop the Germans in their tracks. Panzer Brigade 107 gets absolutely nowhere. Lots of prisoners are taken, over 1,000 POWs, 300 German dead. There's another absolute sort of 1588 millimeters are captured. I mean, 101st Airborne does a really, really good job with their British support. But, D+2 is now over on the 19th of September. And as we know from the previous episodes, 19th September is also Black Tuesday in Arnhem.
It's the critical day in Arnhem,
Well, it's a critical day in Arnhem, and the faint threads of opportunity from which to kind of salvage the situation are slipping away with every passing hour. You can argue, and argue fairly convincingly, I would say, that it's already too late. But be that as it may, they're still going to capture this road bridge over Nijmegen come hell or high water. And this is going to involve one of the most extraordinary operations carried out in the whole of the European theatre of
World War II.
Of World War II.
Okay, so join us after the break as Jim and I leap into a canvas boat and paddle across the Vaal. We'll see you in a tick.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Now, we dangled you the juicy, juicy morsel of the river assault over the Waal. I think it's probably one of those military actions that people maybe know about as a sort of like, they did what? But before that was something we just need to tickle up. So first thing on Wednesday morning, on the Wednesday, 20th September.
The taxi rank has turned into Hell's Highway.
Yeah, is now Hell's Highway. As the Germans, as we said at the end of the last part, are doing what they can to apply pressure. Schwerpunkt is south. They've figured out that if you cut it off at the bottom, the whole thing's there for the taking, the Germans. Rather than stymieing the British effort to get north, if you cut the whole thing off at the bottom, then maybe you've an even bigger prize than delaying the capture of these bridges over the Rhine. You've actually rolled up the entire thing. And the Germans realise that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that, people like Model and student stuff, there is absolutely no value whatsoever on human life. So they just fling these ill-trained, ill-equipped. I mean, there's absolutely no way that, I don't think that had the ball been on the other foot, the Allies would have attacked in the same way. But they're Nazis.
Exactly. In Bob Kerschel's great book, It Never Snows in September, that's the conclusion he draws. because that book was written after he was on a NATO airborne exercise, and he said it's incredibly confusing. And he basically comes to the conclusion, our Western societies, first of all, they don't, the birth rate's gone. And secondly, we're too risk averse to fight the way that the Germans fought to stop an airborne operation. Quantification of risk in the 1940s is one thing, but by the 1990s, late 80s, because I think that book came out in the early 90s, it's basically saying you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't defend the way that the Germans do in this situation, which is just to pump people in. And it's anyone and everyone. They don't care. You've got NCOs as stiffeners to make sure that things work properly. But fine, they all got wiped out. Doesn't matter. As long as we hold them up, who cares? It's pretty bitter, actually, when you look at it that way. Yes, the Germans do an incredible job, but at what cost?
Oh, incredible cost, isn't it? It is absolutely, totally brutal. Anyway, so the fighting continues around Somme all that day, but the 107th Panzer Brigade get absolutely nowhere. Yep. 101st, with their British support, absolutely see them off.
Yep.
Hell's Highway turns back into the taxi rank.
Yeah,
it's all fine. And meanwhile, the rest of 30 Corps is pushing forward, and not least the engineers with their assault boats and all the rest of it. By the morning of the 20th of September, it's absolutely clear that the Allies need a new plan around Nijmegen. There is an acceptance that Nijmegen is going to have to be cleared house by house, and that the river crosser is going to be needed. And there's a meeting that morning between Gavin, Reuben Tucker, who is the 504th commander, General Boyd Browning, and George Chatterton, interestingly.
Well, he's tagging along with Browning, isn't he? In fact, he's driving his Jeep for him.
Plus officers of the Guards Armoured Division. There's this great kind of sort of cliché American, cliché British moment where Reuben Tucker is chewing on a cigar and occasionally spitting, and Brigadier Gwotkin, who's wearing cord suede desert boots and sitting on a shooting stick, looks slightly aghast every time Tucker spits.
And, someone's a Wickhamist, someone went to Harrow. It's all that stuff.
All of that.
Yeah.
Whereas Reuben Tucker's just a straight talking.
Yeah, exactly.
The new plan is basically the same as the old plan. It's sounding a bit like a Who song. They secure the town and then launch the 3rd Battalion of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which is one of Reuben Tucker's, in boats under a smokescreen. So General Jim Gavin and General Alan Adair, who is the commander of the Guards Armoured, agree that Nijmegen should be cleared house by house. Each infantry company is going to be supported by a troop of tanks.
Right.
Now, large numbers of homeless civilians are now at St. Canisius Hospital. And staff are dealing up with 4,000 cases per day by this point. The whole of the town is on fire. There's billowing dark smoke rising up into the sky. Buildings are collapsing. It's a horror story to be all horror stories. Each street, once cleared, is then to be blocked by an Achilles tank destroyer from the 21st Anti-Tank Regiment. In the kind of early fighting around the Kaiser Londen-Wijk plain, which is near Hannepart, 4 British tank commanders are hit by bullets, by snipers, in their turrets. Incredibly tough fighting this.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the 504th men are clearing the area around the huge PGEM power station, which is this huge kind of industrial building, again, now empty. This is one that gets hit by the bombers before in the early hours of the 17th of September, and so it gets rid of all the electricity in the area. And they managed to take this with the help of Lieutenant Colonel Giles Vandeleurs, Shermans of the 3rd Irish Guards.
Who's Joe Vandeleur's cousin, isn't he?
Yeah, and they're super tight. They're like big bros. The actual crossing of the Vaal is held up by the attacks on Somme, which means the boats can't get up there from the engineers. That fighting has to be kind of seen off. So yet again, there's a kind of another delay. By the time they do all get to Nijmegen, only 26 arrive because a number of them have been hit and destroyed on the way up.
Yeah.
King's Company of the Grenadiers managed to clear the Valkhof. They also take the police station, and then an MG platoon sent to the roof for what is described as a wonderful shoot. And this basically means that by the afternoon, the southern area all around the bridge, the only thing that hasn't quite been cleared is the Belvedere. But the bulk of it, the Hunter Park is gone, the Lodewijk plane has been captured, say the police station, the post office, all of those have been captured. Those people that got stuck there on the first night, they've been cleared out. But all of them, they're all just sitting there absolutely terrified that any moment now the whole bridge is going to blow. This is absolutely high-tension stuff.
I mean, if you were the Germans, this would be the moment to blow the damn thing as well, isn't it? I mean, this.
Yeah, and lots of people are saying that, but actually, it's I can't remember if it's a student or modal who says absolutely no way.
No, we've got to leave it open to keep pressure up on the Allies. There is a big dispute, a big arm wrestle about what on earth to do. And no one can quite decide. It's to the Allies' advantage that certainly the Germans have decided not to blow it. Thank heavens for that.
So basically, all the approaches to the southern end of the road bridge have been cleared by 3 o'clock, which is around the time that they're going to finally launch this attack across the Waal. The commander of this crossing is going to be Major Julian Cook, who is the commander of the 3rd Battalion of the 504th. The previous night, 1970, he'd been given the task and allotted this task and briefed his officers, who, has to be said, were not exactly over the moon to hear that things weren't going very well at Arnhem.
Yes, because news is now trickling through from Arnhem at this point. They know it's not good. On Tuesday morning, they speak to 30 Corps, and 30 Corps say, we're 20 miles away. You think, well, they say, we're in Nijmegen, 20 miles away. You think, no, that's not 20 miles away. So where are you? And we're about to put in a river assault. If you're at Arnhem Bridge, you're thinking, well, they're not close at hand then.
See you in a month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Cook gets his guys together.
And the PGM plant has been cleared that morning. So that all around Kranhof Park, that on that northwestern side of Nijmegen. Nijmegen still sits just below. It doesn't really extend over to the northern side of the Waal. It's really on the southern side. The bridge, as we discussed in the second episode, is on the eastern end of the city. The rail bridge is on the western end, and that's where the PGM power plant is as well.
It's sort of a reflection of Arnhem in the way.
Yeah, with a bit in between known as the island, which is about 8 miles in depth. Anyway, so this means that Major Cook and his men of the 3rd Battalion of the 504th can all kind of move up to their kind of launch positions on the southern banks and the northwestern area of Nijmegen. And it also means that Cook, Tucker, Giles Vandeleur, as well as the senior commanders like Horrocks, Gavin and Browning, can all head up to the 9th floor of the PGM, where they get this great view of the crossing point, and they can see right across this flat area beyond. They can look at the kind of the 2 forts which are on the other side on the northern side of the banks of the Waal. It's exactly what they need to do. The 3rd Battalion operations officer is a chap called Captain Henry Keep, who also climbed up to the 9th floor. And do you want to do this one?
We saw green grassy flatlands that ran for about 900 yards, then rose to form a dike with a 2-lane road on it. This was the route we would follow to the railroad and highway bridges. We could see enemy machine gun positions along the dike and also on the flat terrain. We observed mortar and artillery units behind the dike and 20mm guns on the railroad bridge. I felt rather funny inside. I think everyone else did too, although no one said a word. We just looked.
In other words...
Fucking hell.
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I think that's fair to say.
They're going to get in the boats. They're going to cross the Marswell Canal just to the west of the building and all this. But the current's too strong and all this. But there's a moment where I think it's really interesting. Reuben Tucker, all he says to Giles Vandeleur, just stop the crouch shooting. Just stop the crouch shooting us and we'll do the rest. I mean, if you want a mission command moment there.
That's it.
That's it. You stop them shooting at us, we'll crack on with it. There is this fact that you have the British and the Americans working alongside one another, but if they're communicating with each other like that, that's fine, isn't it? There's mutual understanding and cooperation right there.
Yeah. No, I agree. There might be some cultural issues.
Sort of refreshing directness to that.
Refreshing directness to that, exactly. So the idea is for the Irish Guards to cover the crossing by just pounding it, in a way actually that they don't use them in the crossing of the Rapido, for example, in January 1944 in Italy. Those tanks are not there. What is blindingly obvious to Reuben Tucker and to Captain Julian Cook clearly isn't blindingly obvious to Major General Fred Walker and his staff on the 36th Texas Division. Anyway, so the idea is that the Shermans are hull down. They're still quite vulnerable, but of course you would be in a combat situation like this. The guy who's the squadron commander in charge is Major Edward Tyler of the Irish Guards. He spaces his Shermans 20 metres apart, something like that. He worries that his silhouettes would be obvious and vulnerable, but, what can you do? The 2nd Battalion, the 504th, are also brought up to provide machine gun support. They grab every machine gun they possibly can. Again, just to reiterate the point, this is all completely absent when they're crossing the Rapido in January 1944.
This is essentially pepper potting, isn't it? The thing that becomes pepper potting later in the war, yeah.
Yeah. You've got tanks, use them for all their versatility. The fact that they've got twin machine guns, the fact that actually they can even mount a third one on the top, on the turret. The fact that you've got a 75mm, the fact that they're quick firing, just keep pounding them. Yeah. Because the enemy, particularly if they're not very well trained, and even SS troops aren't, will keep their heads down while they're being attacked. So, that means they then can't be shooting at the boats. But, Tyler admits that the fear of God is put into him. It's very easy to spot MG positions from the 9th floor, but they can't see anything from ground level. So it's just, you're shooting blind, but, maybe that's good enough. Behind them are then the Leicester Yeomanry with sextants, these 25-pounders and the Sherman chassis. There's a further delay getting into the boats. There's rising nerves among the men making the crossing, as you could imagine. Lieutenant Virgil F. Carmichael wrote, "As the hour of 3 o'clock approached, the men became more nervous and tense. I clearly remember one man taking out a Camel cigarette, lighting it with a valued Zippo lighter, and throwing away the pack and throwing the Zippo away, saying that he'd have no need of them no more. As it turned out, he did not."
That's a perfect short story, isn't it? Incredible. Oh, God. So they split their platoons, 13 men per boat. The trucks finally arrive at 3 o'clock. The men are like, what? They're canvas boats with a flat-bottom wooden frame?
What the cuss?
Yeah, exactly. The British sappers are going, well, that's it, mate. That's what you got. Don't worry.
Don't look at me. It wasn't my fault.
Exactly. Well, not my fault, mate. These are the best boats we've got. You see any better boats around here, you hop in them, mate.
Yeah, chuck us a camel.
And then you've got H&I companies first, Company G to follow, the 307th Airborne Engineers to crew the boats. At 1500 hours on the dot, the Leicestershire Yeomanry open fire with their 25-pounders. Oh, God. The paratroopers are in their boats at 15:15.
I'm feeling tense just going through this, aren't you?
Exactly. Once in the water, the Irish Guards also open fire. 376 parachute field artillery also join in with their 75mm. Smokescreen does a good job to start with. Each Sherman, though, only has 12 smoke shells, so there's a limit to how much smoke they can lay. Henry Keep had been an oarsman at Princeton and was doing what he could to get the men to pull in rhythm. I mean, they're using rifle butts as well as oars.
Go for 10.
And then they're about halfway across, but the Germans start.
Yes, because to start off, if it's all going quite well, they're thinking, this is going to be okay. The smoke is, but the smoke starts to filter away. And then suddenly the bullets start kind of ringing out. And where the bullets have been inaccurate, they've now started to get their bead. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah. And Lieutenant John Gorman of the Irish Guards, there was smoke on the water. You could see the splashes of bullets hit the Americans in the boat suddenly slump over.
And Giles Vandeleur, the commander of the 3rd Battalion of the Irish Guards, is also watching. He goes, it was a horrible, horrible sight. Boats were literally being blown out of the water. I could see huge geysers of water shooting up as the shells hit the water. And the small arms fire coming from the northern bank made the river look like some sort of seething cauldron.
And then Captain Henry Keep. In everyone's ears was the constant roar of bursting artillery shells, the dull wham of a 20mm or the disconcerting ping of rifle bullets. I felt as naked as the day I was born. We were soaked, gasping for breath, dead tired, and constantly expecting to feel that searing sensation as the bullet tears through you. I wanted to vomit. Many did. Somehow or other, we were 3/4 of the way across. Everyone was yelling to keep it up, but there was little strength left in anyone.
This is a bad day at the office, isn't it? Let's face it.
And yet, they press on. They get over the river. They're using their helmets to scoop out water.
Because bullet holes are going into the canvas and water's coming in. So they're not only paddling, they're kind of getting lower and lower and lower in the water. I mean, can you imagine? Our muscles absolutely aching. You're absolutely gasping. I mean, we've all been in that situation where you just think, I haven't got another breath in me, but I've just got to keep going.
And then Captain Tyler raises his guns to fire at the fort at Hof van Holland. And then the Germans do some counter battery fire. Irish Guards commander's killed. A Sherman's knocked out by an anti-tank gun being towed by a horse.
No, the Sherman knocked it out, the anti-tank gun. And the guy who knocked it out then sees the horse just wander off. Like, yay, I'm finally free of those bastards.
But they're on the other side of the river now, so it can kick off properly. And, they're working through one German strong point after another. They're Germans from SS, replacement battalions, but they still need dealing with. This is the thing. It doesn't matter who they are, what their quality is. They all need dealing with one by one. Teenagers, they're finding them in foxholes, hauling bodies out and using them as sandbags. It's really bitter, vicious stuff.
Their blood's up, though, isn't it? The adrenaline's absolutely pumping and, they just want to kill Krauts and, all that kind of stuff. This is really, really tough, close quarter, no quarter given kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, Tucker pulls a teenager out by the scruff of his neck, doesn't he? It's that
sees
stuff.
The boy just absolutely quivering. And he looks at him and says, son, your buddy's writing checks your buddy can't cash. Or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Spits at him with some tobacco.
Kid, are you the master race? Not anymore.
You guys made me want to puke.
And then Cook's men, they move east along the embankment to the railway bridge. They have to clear the Hof van Holland fort, which is, as we said a moment ago, has been shelled by 25-pounders. They take it over. Most Germans are killed on the spot, as there's only around 15 to 20 paratroopers left. Also, you've got this thing that basically their blood's up. They've not got time to take prisoners. They've not got the means to take prisoners. So, unfortunately, one way or another, Nijmegen's still on fire.
But equally, we don't want to imply that they're shooting literally everyone. They are taking prisoners.
I said most Germans are shot on the spot. I didn't say all of them.
Don't want to get sued by the 82nd Airborne.
Exactly. It's dusk. It's absolute carnage. You've got Germans jumping off the railway bridge in panic, others opening fire. The 2nd Battalion are now attacking from the southern side. And the Germans are absolutely slaughtered. There's no one taken prisoner from that encounter.
And that ain't libel.
But at the same time, the Grenadier Guards are fighting south of the river, as it were.
Yeah, the Kampfgruppe Euling at the Valkhof.
Yeah, and they take the Belvedere.
They managed to find a little breakthrough by an unguarded little alleyway and get in.
And as they get in to the Belvedere, they find these SS slogans, death rather than tyranny, and we believe in Adolf Hitler and our victory. I mean, jeepers. And Van der Voort's watching all of this.
It was pretty spectacular. When the lead tank reached the crest of the bridge, it came under fire from an 80mm gun sandbagged into the side of the highway, about 100 or so yards from the north end of the bridge. The tank and the 88 exchanged about 6 rounds apiece, with the tank spitting 30 caliber traces all the while. Quite a show in the gathering dusk. The tank was not hit, and the 88 ceased firing.
And, of course, one of the first guys across is Captain Lord Peter Carrington, who is the second in command of Number 1 Squadron. And he is the second vehicle to start moving across the bridge behind Sergeant Robinson in his Firefly. And behind him is Lieutenant Tony Jones of the 14th Field Squadron RE, who is there right at the front to deal with these explosives.
And Robinson's been exchanging fire with a sniper who's on the bridge.
It's on the superstructure, because it's one of his great big curved things. So he's climbed up onto the superstructure. History doesn't relate what happens to him, with German sniper, that is, but presumably he gets taken out.
Who knows? But by the end of all this, you've got tanks across. You've got 4 tanks across. They're leaguering the other side, waiting for more to follow. You've got Captain Cook's guys, 89 killed in action, 151 wounded. And they join up. Now, this is the famous moment where Cook's men are furious that the advance to Arnhem has halted. But, what really are the Grenadier Guards going to do? They've been fighting all day. Tanks need to refuel, rearm, and all that.
Tanks don't operate at night. You can't.
They do not operate at night. It's impossible. And the chaos of the city and the aftermath of it all. And you do wonder if Cook's guys would have had anything left in them actually to go forward and fight, really.
Yeah, I think this is all just, they're kind of like...
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
Their blood is up. They've just killed loads of crowds. They've seen lots of their buddies being killed and all the rest of it. And you're like, what the heck? We know how they reacted in that moment, but in the kind of cool light of day the following morning, I mean, I'm sure it was a slightly different kind of fish. But I mean, the truth is they couldn't have gone on that night.
No, it's impossible.
You can't go on with tanks. It's just, you can't do those kind of operations at night.
And that means, inevitably, some Tommy within eyeshot of someone from Cook's battalion starts making a cup of tea.
And all they were doing is sitting around having cups of tea. Well, all the Americans are doing is sitting around having cups of coffee and smoking Camels. So, I mean, it's just... You can see how that would look.
But had you taken the bridge on the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, we wouldn't be having this conversation about, the legend of the British brewing up and delayed.
No, and you wouldn't have had the sacrifice of the 3rd Battalion crossing the River Vaal.
The delay has already happened.
So say, from Boyd Browning through to Gavin, curiously, I can't square Gavin's actions. I think the only way you can square it is that, your number one priority back home, and this is probably from Brereton, this has also been hammered by Browning, and he can see it, that if you're going to have a second lift, you've got to protect that second lift. So that's one thing. Second thing is he's cracked 2 vertebrae in his spine, so he's obviously in massive pain. I don't know about you, but when I'm in huge pain, my ability to think clearly and logically is seriously impaired, because Gavin's such a dynamic fighting figure. He's so lucid in his thought and clear thinking and pragmatic and methodical and all these sort of things. It seems so out of keeping that he would pussyfoot around and faff around with not taking the bridge. These are the only explanations I can come up with. Whereas I think there is lots of form where Horrocks, for example, has faffed around. Talk about Wadi Akarit in beginning of April 1943, where he absolutely catastrophically lets a massive opportunity to fold up the Italians at Wadi Akarit go to pass just by not being on it enough.
Well, even within this operation, the 30 Corps set off at 2:30.
Yeah, what the heck? He's impossible to dislike, but he's also quite easy to criticise as a senior commander, I think.
that's not a bad combination of person. It makes him sort of human. It makes him three-dimensional.
It does make him human, yeah, but, we're allowed to be critical 80 years after the event.
But there we are. So, Nijmegen Bridge is in Allied hands.
At long last.
What is happening 10 miles to the north? Well, join us in our next episode to find out the rest of the story of 1st Airborne's trials and tribulations and the extraordinary stand and the mind-boggling bravery that occurs in Arnhem in our next part. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to listen to these all in one go to our Apple channel, sign up as officer class for less than a pint of beer, certainly in most major cities in the United Kingdom, less than the price of a pint of beer.
Oh, no, substantially less than a pint of an iced latte, trust me. I bought 2 cups of coffee the other day at Starbucks, one for me, one for Daisy. It cost me £10.50. What the heck?
This is the content you're all here for. Thanks for listening, or join our Patreon and become a patron. We will see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.
Arnhem, Black Tuesday, 24 hours in the Battle of Arnhem. From me, Al Murray. Now, if you're familiar with me, and we have ways of making you talk, you know I do everything I can to crowbar the Battle of Arnhem into every conversation. Well, here it is, the full crowbar. Arnhem, Black Tuesday, out now in hardback, ebook and audio.
Hi, it's Catty here from The Rest is Politics US. Anthony Scaramucci and I want to tell you about this great new series we've done on how Donald Trump won the White House in 2016. We're going to take you right back in time and explain just how Donald Trump went from being that extraordinary apprentice reality TV star and real estate developer in New York City to being president of the United States in just 18 months.
We're going to start right from the moment he descended the escalator to November the 8th. I was with him at 6 p.m. on November the 8th, election night, and we're going to regale you with stories related to the campaign, why he has so much loyal support, what he does in debate preparation in 2016, all of the different intrigue that went on in the campaign, and some of the things that we were battling internally while we were also fighting the Clinton campaign.
There's no doubt that 2016 was this extraordinary historic moment. It changed American politics. It hangs over the country. It hangs over the world still today.
So come join us, The Rest is Politics US, wherever you get your podcasts. It's a 4-part mini-series. Find out how Trump won the White House in 2016, and it'll tell you a lot about where we are in 2024.